The first presenter will be Diane Cornman-Levy. And Diane Cornman-Levy is the executive director of the Federation of Neighborhood Centers in Philadelphia. And this is a 103-year-old organization. It's a nonprofit organization that actually works to help out and to oversee 12 different neighborhood centers in very low-resource communities within Philadelphia. So she has provided and developed innovative community-based training programs, including teen entrepreneurship programs, innovative job development programs for low-skilled adults, and she has focused exclusively on Philadelphia. And what she can show us, for the story that she'll be able to show us, is how much can be done with tenacity, with consistent leadership, creativity, and commitment to the low-income neighborhoods within one city. So Diane will be leading off, followed by Dr. Grace Dyrness, who is an urban anthropologist who has worked on poverty and coping strategies of women all over the world. She's the former director of community research and development for the Center for Religion and Civic Culture at the University of Southern California. She's also the founder and senior researcher at the Institute for Transnational Research and Development in Pasadena, California. And her research has focused on women and economic development, homelessness, street-living women and children, and the role that non-government organizations, NGOs, can play in community transformation. She also brings considerable expertise and understanding of how faith-based organizations work for social change. So she brings to this panel important perspectives on migration, on homelessness, and the role of religion for women and children in impoverished urban settings. She'll be going as number 2. Number 3 will be Jane Golden. Jane had just received, she was a youngster, she just received her degree in fine arts and political science at Stanford when the mayor of Philadelphia asked her to come and address this terrible problem with graffiti that was plaguing the city. And so here she was, this young person, and she started looking at the street activity and recognized the raw artistic talent of many of these graffiti writers. And she began to work with them, not just to counter them, fight them, combat them, which was what she was asked to do, but she instead began to work with them and transform their graffiti to extraordinary public art. In the modest beginning of that program, she has subsequently developed the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program, which has created in the city alone 3,000 murals. It's involved over 20,000 youth. She didn't stop with just creating art. She also has all kinds of job development programs, and she's working with women, she's working with prisoners in the poorest communities. I think her work on this panel demonstrates the power of art to break the cycle of violence and to create a vision of hope which inspires all of us as we live and work in this beautiful city every day. Thank you, Jane. And then last but definitely not least is David Gouverneur. Did I say that right? Pretty right? He originally trained as an architect at Harvard. An architect I think it was in Uruguay, actually, and then he became an expert in urban design at Harvard. He has been the director in Venezuela of the urban development of Venezuela, and he has worked not just on individual projects, but on slums, on favelas, in cities all over the world, and particularly in Latin America. he brings incredible hope and solutions to the problems of urban slums, and I think with a unique focus on the environment. And so I hope that you will enjoy the panel as much as I, and let's go. Diane.
Good morning. Welcome to Philadelphia for those who are not here. I'm really delighted to be here on a topic that's so important as women's health. And as it was briefly said, that I'm the head of a Federation of Neighborhood Centers, which is a network of 12 neighborhood centers that are located in some of the poorest neighborhoods in Philadelphia. And collectively, we provide health and human services to 75,000 children, youth, and families per year. And we provide really a holistic approach to dealing with the needs of families. And I'm going to kind of talk about women's health in the context of family health, because I think when we really talk about the health of women, women are usually the primary caregivers of their children, that we really are talking about family health. And I just want to give you some brief statistics in relation to our city here in Philadelphia. At 24%, Philadelphia has the third highest poverty rate among the United States cities. In terms of Philadelphia Health Management Corporation, who does a lot of assessments in our city around health issues, the latest survey indicates that 29% of adults and 28% of children in Philadelphia are obese. 89% of adults and 85% of children eat fewer than recommended 5 fruits and vegetables daily. 27% rate their fresh produce in their community as fair or poor. 47% of adults had takeout food at least once in the past week. And in Philadelphia, 55% of adults are physically active at least 3 times per week, and 45% are active about 3 times per week. Related to this, some of the health statistics in some of the poorest neighborhoods in Philadelphia, 10% report having heart conditions, 12% are diabetic, 36% have high blood pressure, 35% are overweight, 29% are obese. Among children and youth, 27% have asthma, 18% are overweight, 26% are obese. They also rated grocery stores as fair or poor in their neighborhoods, and actually among some of the largest cities, we have fewer groceries, major grocery stores in these neighborhoods in the entire country. So access to fresh food and good quality food is a huge issue among people that living in our neighborhoods in Philadelphia. Another statistic came out: 1 in 4 Philadelphians had to skip or cut meals due to lack of money. This past year, that means 360,000 people and 108,000 children had to skip or cut meals due to lack of money. And also, Philadelphia area ranked among the hungriest in the nation, only second to Bronx, New York, in the latest study. So basic needs such as food is huge, and it's really increasing. Our neighborhood centers provide food covers, and they found an average 35% increase in people coming to their doors to get food for themselves and for their children. And unfortunately, we just don't have the resources to meet those needs. So what have we been doing? What are some creative examples and solutions that we can actually do that are really neighborhood-based? And about 2004, I actually was running a neighborhood center in North Philadelphia. And as if you know anything about Philadelphia, there are thousands of vacant lots. And I don't even know what the number is. You might know, Jane. It's huge. It's just thousands. 41, 50. It's like 41,000 vacant lots. It's just a huge amount of vacant lots in Philadelphia. And these are sources of drug activities, trash, really safety issues. And when I was in North Philadelphia, I actually met with community leaders, and wasn't surprised that all of them were African American women, and they were all either mothers or grandmothers. And we sat around and we actually said, what are some of the needs in your community? And they started addressing all kinds of things. We don't have grocery stores. We don't have access to healthy food. These vacant spaces are sources of violence for our children. And they even talked about the recreation centers as not being safe places. So even their playgrounds that were not taken care of were places of violence, and they couldn't even let their children go there. So we talked about a lot of all these issues, and we said, well, how do we even begin to address this? The other issue that came up, and we're talking about women's health, is women, mothers and grandmothers worry about their children every day. We all do, right, as mothers. And they said, if you want to help our health, help the health of our children, provide safe places for our children, get them engaged in activities that not only keep them off the streets, but really gives them skills and opportunities that so they don't not end up living a life of poverty like we do. So we said, okay, let's think about this. There's vacant spaces. We don't have access to healthy food in this neighborhood. The closest grocery store was about 5 miles away. The recreation centers are not only antiquated and run down, there's drug dealing is happening, trash is being thrown, so the children can't even go there. So we said, okay, there's multiple problems. Well, the beauty of this is when you organize women and you start organizing them around their children, they get very passionate and creative. So we said, okay, let's start with getting a parcel of land and actually say, can we transform it into a garden? And I said, better yet, let's transform it into an urban farm where we actually grow our own food for our community. Great idea. And then they said, well, how do we engage children, particularly teens? Because there's more programs for younger children, but teens is a huge issue, and the violence among teens is really escalating in our city. How do we engage youth that in a meaningful way that really, again, helps them build skills, provide a positive support network for teens? So we said, well, let's create a youth-led business. Let's have the youth start this urban agricultural business. So after 6 months of negotiating with the Department of Recreation here in Philadelphia, we actually got a parcel of land, and actually this slide is our first urban farm. And Jane Golden was involved in this too. We said, can we get this small, half an acre, a little less than half an acre lot, and actually start an urban farm? And they were very like, I don't know about this, and you're really going to get teenagers to farm in the city? You know, they laughed at me. And I don't know anything about farming. So I said, you know what, let's try. So we actually organized 5 youth under the leadership of some of the women leaders in that community, and we secured this parcel of land. And the youth, and then we built a team. We said, what do we need to do to make this happen? And this is where I think the keynote speaker this morning was talking about organizing women, getting them involved in the decision-making process, and then how do we bring resources in to make this happen? So we brought in the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, Philadelphia Green, which actually is really committed to transforming vacant spaces into green, functional, safe spaces. And they had the expertise to do this, so they came on board. We had no money, zero. So we got the land from the Department of Rec. Philadelphia Green said, listen, we'll provide expertise to do this. We'll help you get some seedlings, just get it started. So we actually started this first urban farm. And again, it's in the heart of this neighborhood. And we engaged and we started a youth entrepreneurship program. I'm telling you that what this has done in terms of some of the women in the neighborhood is, one, now we started with 5 youth. We now have 8 urban farms in the city. And we employ about 100 teenagers every summer. So what's beautiful about this is the teens are running these businesses. They're creating fresh produce for the neighborhoods. They're engaged in positive activities. They're learning very important skills in terms of life skills, business skills. They're building a network. And the mothers are not worried about their youth that are involved in this program, because they're involved in this program throughout the year. At the same time, it was a solution to trying to create access to healthy food in these neighborhoods. So last year, we had 6 farms. We were starting 3 minutes. We produced about 7,000 pounds of food. 25% were actually donated to food cupboards. So actually the youth are actually supplying food cupboards in that neighborhood. They actually generated about $6,000 of revenue. Money goes back to the youth. This is another great thing. It's helping women's health, because women, if women have to spend money on themselves, they're spending on their children for book supplies, for whatever it is, clothing. These kids are now making money that they can now support themselves. They were able to buy their book supplies for the year. They were able to get some clothing, So this is I want to really just bring up the whole issue that women's health is really a family health issue. So this is just one model of what we're doing, and Jane Golden is going to speak later. With this first urban farm, we also talked, just real quickly, it was very important to have a visual display of the great community leaders in that neighborhood. And because again, they want their voices heard. And they said, we want to have a mural of these great leaders. And we said, well, who should we talk to? Jane Golden. So Jane actually made that happen. So this urban farm that you see up here is not just an urban farm. It's also a beautiful place. Half of it's a beautiful place for people to come and congregate. They have like health fairs. They have just community events. And then they have this visual display of great community leaders that the Mural Arts did. So we integrated art into food access, into a safety green space, into youth entrepreneurship. So it's a very integrative approach to doing on a local level, and my time is up, so thank you.
Good morning. I'm Grace Dyrness, and it's a pleasure to be with you. And as an urban planner, I wondered why I should be at this conference, but I have definitely caught on as to how definitely integrated our urban environment is with health, and that's what I've been working on many years. I want to thank Claudia especially for the great introduction to our panel, because you set the stage for an absolutely perfect way for us. My own story begins in Costa Rica. I'm from Costa Rica, and it begins with my mother, actually, as a little girl, taking me with her when she was working with slum women at the margins, and she was teaching them skills. And my mother would say, Dios entra por los dedos y transforma la vida de las mujeres. In English, that means God enters through the fingers and transforms the lives of the women. And at that early age, I then began to see an integration of faith and action that ended up, transforming my own life. Years later, I was in the Philippines, lived in the slums of Manila, and tried to study for my master's in urban anthropology how women coped with the situation in which they lived. And since then, that has been kind of the focus of my work and my research. And I have been now having done research in Tanzania, Kenya, Oakland, Los Angeles, which is where I live now, and I teach at USC in the area of advocacy planning, social context of planning, because I feel that that's exactly what we need. We need advocate planners for the complex urban environments in which we live. So many women are drawn by the economic opportunities and maybe also freedom and equality to get into the cities. And, they often arrive really unprepared for what they encounter when they arrive in that city. They have discrimination, prejudice, all kinds of things, and often become engaged in the informal sector of the economy, working in all kinds of marginal occupations. We've heard throughout the course of these days exactly that situation, so I will not elaborate, nor does my time allow me to elaborate. But I do want to look at ways in which women cope with life at the margins. What have I found as I've been listening and talking with these are my friends who've become my friends. They really do, I've learned that Chinese adage, women do hold up half the sky. This is exactly what I have found by listening to these women. So I'm going to just share 4 things, which I know David is going to share some others that I also agree with and have found. But the first one is that cities, as Claudia said, cities are a space for opportunity for women. So, they provide a way in which women, even though they may seem like they are invisible and disempowered in their class of workers, yet they do have opportunities in the city that they didn't have back home. And what I found is actually no matter what the job is that these women have, in the end, they really find that it gives them a source of income, which gives them a position of power within their own families and within their own communities, something that they have been able to use to strengthen their position in the home and to be able to provide in a way that they weren't able to provide. So, you know, when I wonder sometimes, well, why don't they go back home to the rural place? And I asked Aling Lita in Manila, I said, you know, why don't you go back? You're living here, and it's a very poor situation. And she said, here is where my dreams are being realized. She said, it is here. I wished we could have had my own home, and now I have my own home. It's difficult, but I am very thankful that this is where I am. And it doesn't matter that it is just a shack, it is hers. And this provides that opportunity. The same is true for the mothers in East LA that I work with, where, you know, they're from Mexico and have lived now for years, because we know that these places become permanent dwelling and not just transitory places. And I asked them also, Maria told me, no, I'm not going back to Mexico. I don't want to go back. My husband has gone back, but I am much better off here. So really the new city becomes a permanent dwelling places, and despite the challenges that the women face, it still remains a place for opportunity. So making those spaces safer for them is exactly what we want to do. The second thing that I want to just bring to our attention is that women form ties that bind. They form strong social networks that support them in the midst of negotiating the complex world in which they're living. My daughter, Andrea Dyrness, in her forthcoming book, relates how a group of Latina women really gathered weekly in the kitchen of one of the mothers to strategize for reform in the schools they were attending. And for the mothers that came together for change in the small school system in Oakland, the home really became a place for healing and resistance, and a base for community change. And indeed, for me, I have seen that the home is a center for community transformation and solidarity, and it's a key strategy for women that I have worked with. For example, Southeast Asian refugees from Laos, who are Mien people, they, through their home, connected with a group of American women, and through the sharing and telling of stories and developing trust relationships, these home gatherings helped them verbalize the trauma that they had gone through when they found American women who actually validated their stories. And you began to see even physical ailments leave as this kind of relationship built. So, you know, this kind of solidarity really helps women. And in this picture that you see here, you see also in many of the slums, women develop a way in which they support one another in their own income generation. Women will cook and sell things in the streets, sell things in market stalls, but what happens if you get sick? You then will not be able to meet the needs of your customers, and they'll leave you and go to somebody else. So another woman in your group will go and cook for you and deliver that food to your customers so that you will not lose your customer base. And in return, the next time, I will do the same for them. And so this is a way in which these solid networks come to help women cope with the situation in which they find themselves. The third one is really caring for other people, reaching out. And we find that happening so often all over. Praxedes is a woman who lives in the slums of Kibera in Nairobi, one of the biggest slums in East Africa. And she started reaching out to street children and now has 500 kids that she's taking care of. Well, you know, out of that kind of caring, women find a sense of purpose and meaning in the midst of the situation that they find themselves. And so this is another coping strategy, really, that I have found, reaching out and caring for others. And finally, I want to talk about the role of religion, because religion does, many migrant women in our cities and other places turn to religion. They come from religious backgrounds, and when they arrive in the city, this is the place where they know they find someone with a common background. So whether it's the priest or the rabbi or whoever it is this kind of coming together both at an individual level as well as an organizational level that has helped many women cope. Ernestine Avila talks about the role that prayer plays in transnational mothers, mothers who care for kids here while they're trying to care for kids back home. And they pray to God to help with them with the challenges. They pray to God, for God to help them to keep their children safe where they are back home. And in some, prayer is the one way in which transnational mothers and fathers transcend distance between their families. And while the distance is still felt on some level, it helps them cope with that separation. But religion is also an arena for mobilization and civic participation and solidarity. And here I really want to qualify my statement, because I also know that religion can do exactly the opposite. It can be a place for disempowerment and persecution of women. And so I'm not talking about that type of religion. I'm talking about the more progressive style of religion. Interfaith coalitions can really be a way in which women can be supported. An example, in Los Angeles, there's an organization called Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. And this group of clergy and laity have come together to stand by hotel workers. Most of the hotel workers, including the ones that are serving us here, are invisible to most of us. We don't even notice who they are, and yet they are caring for our needs while we're in this hotel. These workers often are not under any contract. They don't have benefits. Now with these new puffy down covers that get put on our beds, they're hurting their backs as they shake these, and they have no health benefits. So Clergy and Laity United came together with the hotel workers and said, okay, let's ask for you to become a part of the union so that you will have rights. Let's get contracts from the hotel workers. And through demonstrations and actions and meeting with the CEOs, they have really found that these hotels have responded, and they have signed contracts with 7 of the key hotels in Los Angeles, and it is starting to multiply. Through this, the women have found that they have a voice. They have found courage to speak up. With a clergy standing behind them, how could they not speak up and tell their CEO exactly what's happening to them? And so I think these are positive ways in which religion really helps women cope with the situation in which they're located in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'm really honored to be here today. So I just want to say, so in Philadelphia we have 3,225 indoor and outdoor murals that we've created since 1984. I know, it's great. It's a city with art. But more importantly, it's a city where art has been created by people, with young people. We serve 2,000 young people annually, employ 350 artists every year, work in 6 area prisons, work in shelters, and believe really deeply that every citizen has a right to have art in their life. But our program has really been driven for many, many years by the spirit of women, starting in 1984 when I met Miss Rachel Bagby and Miss Willie Mae Bullock in North Philadelphia, and we were going door to door to see where we could do a mural, and people said, we really, quite frankly, don't want art in our neighborhood because our neighborhood's been impoverished for 20 years. What is art going to do? And we were very tenacious. It was me, the graffiti writers, well, former graffiti writers. We had an undercover police car that was dented. When you beeped the horn, the trunk flew open. It was very mysterious. I never quite figured it out. But we had real willpower and a belief that art could transform space. And so finally people invited us in, and Miss Bagby looked at me and she said, you know, Jane, the only visual stimulation we have in this neighborhood are billboards advertising alcohol and tobacco. Our kids will never have beauty. And I could say, Miss Bagby, I believed this then, I believe it now. This is why murals are great, because murals make art accessible to everyone. I love galleries and museums. Art does not belong behind those walls exclusively, period. So I said, so what can we do? What do you want? And she said, well, things are usually done to us or not done. We want murals of family farms in the South. We want our kids and grandkids to know where we grew up. And then somebody else said, we want Dr. King, or we want Malcolm X. And you know what? we started to go out and we did this work. But the women, they became our early mentors and our role models and sources of inspiration because they were pushing the boulder up the mountain with very few resources. And so for us, we thought, well, if they can do it, we can do it. We can join forces with them. So we started doing murals, and the murals became a tipping point. People started to go from seeing their neighborhood in terms of it being a liability to really seeing potential. We were able to mine the catalytic power of art and put it to work. And you know something? We saw firsthand that murals were a sign that things could change and people cared. But it was driven by the spirit of these incredible leaders and block captains. Then we went down to Norris Square, and there Tomasita Romero and Iris Brown said to me, you know what we get from the city? I said, what? They said in Spanish, and I'm not very good at Spanish, so I would brutalize it, but it means the tail of the cow. And they said, that's what we get. Will you join forces with us? And we said, yes. And so we would meet them on Saturday mornings, and we'd take the trash away, and they would stare down the drug dealers, and we'd help pressure the police. And we tried to help demystify city government. We designed a little resource guide, and my former boss would call us all the time and say, Jane Golden, the streets commissioner said that a group of artists reported the pothole problems. Was that you? And I would say, guilty as charged. And because we were out there on the front lines of social change, and it was incredibly inspiring and exciting. Here's a mural that was done down there by an artist from Cuba. And then we were anti-graffiti to 1996, and then in 1997, anti-graffiti was restructured, and we were made part of the Department of Recreation. Governor Rendell, who was mayor at the time, said that he would save the little art program, told us to come up with a name for ourselves. We said the Mural Arts Program, and he said, Jane Golden, you're going to be in charge, which was good news, bad news. We didn't have much money, but we were able to leverage public funds and private dollars, and we got on our feet as a pro-art program. This was one of the first pieces we did, and the artist said, the young women I'm working with, she was teaching in high schools all over the city, they have a certain dignity to their stature, and I want to do a mural that's celebratory of young people in the city, but I want the lead figure, 88 feet tall, to be a young woman. This is called Common Threads. It's at Broad Spring Garden, and I want to tell you something. You know, in the world of public art, there's high art, and then there's murals, and what this mural did was it stopped people in their tracks, and they saw mural painting as something with dignity, and they finally gave it the respect it deserved and saw it in this tradition of muralism starting with the Mexican muralists. So this was a wonderful project, but for me, an advocate for kids in this city, and especially thinking about young women and their struggle with identity and respect and representation, this mural was key. Thank you. And then I want to talk about this project. What I want you to see is that public art can be created not just by a lone practitioner, but with kids and with the spirit of the community. Here, the women leaders in the neighborhood said, there used to be a time in this neighborhood where we sat on the roof, we had picnic suppers, we'd look at the stars, it was so safe, and we'd dream. And now we can't do that. So we said, well, we want to capture that past, but reference the future. And there was this young woman on the block who was so wonderful. And so we put her in this mural to inspire. And this mural was created by kids in one of our programs, kids who have dropped out of school, but kids who have strengths and gifts and talents that have just been unrecognized. And that's part of our responsibility. It is a moral imperative to provide young people with every option and opportunity possible. And here we have Reach High and You Can Go Far. Again, we give voice to people who have not had a voice. And then I want to talk about the way we can physically transform the urban landscape in Philadelphia. We don't see the glass half full. We don't see it half empty. We see it half full. This was a space that was totally expendable. It was with trash, crack vials, syringes, and we said, let's change it. We worked with incredible women again in this neighborhood. That's Miss Jones. She has been a beacon in this neighborhood of Mantua for many years. And then we work in prisons. We work in the women's prison at Riverside, and here we have a great 6-story mural that was created by a wonderful artist, but also with many women from Riverside, women who felt they didn't have a chance. When we work in lots of prisons, when I go into the women's prison, I feel the sense of poverty in this country, that there are women who will not come up for air. And so we say, let's provide them with every opportunity possible as well. We have a reentry program. We're putting people to work, doing meaningful things, and now the people that have been in prison are now role models themselves, and it's very inspiring. And then we work in neighborhoods torn apart by crime and violence. And again, this is about the impact and consequences of violent crime. And we worked with people in prison, victims and victims advocates. Hundreds of people worked on this, and we came up with the collective vision that what we want for the city of Philadelphia is that it become a safer, healthier city with opportunities for young people. This is called the Healing Walls. And then a project like this called Legacy with 1 million pieces of Venetian glass, painted in part, the second half, by people who are at Graterford Prison. Again, this has become a beacon. And then we work with the Office of Behavioral Health, where we're looking at our work not just as art, but as health. And we are working to access mental health resources. We're trying to overcome the stigma of mental illness, addiction, and homelessness. We have a project where we have given, looms to shelters all over the city, and we're doing weavings in all the shelters, and there's a beautiful wall that we're doing at 13th and Market. And what the work does, it gives people dignity and respect. It makes sure that their voices are heard, and at the same time, we're physically transforming the landscape because everyone deserves to have beauty in their lives. And there's a quote that I want to end by, and it says, "People need to create their own history, to leave traces of themselves and the meanings they generate in their lives. They feel a need to give expression to their community, to leave trails, to say we are here, and to create beauty." Beyond beauty, people are looking for meaning, and that's what we see at Mural Arts. It is truly the privilege of our work. We have an informal motto at our office, and that motto is that art saves lives. And the gift of the work is that no matter where I go, whether it's at Riverside Prison, or whether it's an after-school program in a church or a recreation center, whether it's a Graterford Prison, or whether it's in any one of the shelters where we're working right now, what we see is the resilience of the human spirit. And that is certainly a triumph. And you know something? The victory is always sweeter when you truly understand the obstacles that people had to overcome. And so I say that art does save lives, and it has a profound impact on all of our lives. Thank you.
Bravo. After that presentation, I have to improvise and change my entire script. What I get out of this is that at the center of this discussion, what we need is energy, leaders, motivators to make a change. I think that's the most we can get out of a conference of this type. I'll try to be, as you say in Spanish, rain over wet soil, because many things have been said already. But in poorer communities, women take the brunt, carry the responsibility of raising their families, providing shelter, and shielding their children from drugs and violence. I truly believe that there's a direct connection between the quality of the urban environment and quality of life. Improvements in the urban turf can reduce violence, improve productivity, enhance sociability, enhance identity. Has been mentioned today, poorer communities tend to be at the fringe, whether we're speaking with wealthy cities or developing cities. They're out there. They're not in the center cores, in the areas of centrality. Therefore, people in the poorer communities do not have access to jobs, to services, to amenities. They have to move, and transportation was an issue that was tackled already. So, how do we deal with these communities that tend to be at the fringe? And since we're dealing with health and medicine, the image that can come to me is acupuncture. And that has to do with selecting areas that are probably the most violent, but already there's community leadership, there's some sort of transportation, there's a vacant lot, there's a desire, there's a good school. So the first magic is to select the appropriate spots. Now we have two different models. Usually we have, in the developing world, as the images that we see here, these barrios, these favelas, are highly congested. There's no accessibility. There's no public space. There are not even roads for police surveillance to put in an ambulance in a case of an emergency, to withdraw garbage. And as it was mentioned before, in cities like, especially in the Northeast and the post-industrial cities, we have vacancies. So we have two different models. So to create these areas of action, of centrality, they're very different according to the context, but the ideas are similar. I will try to illustrate, and probably an example, maybe a role model to follow, is the case of Medellin in Colombia. Medellin, drug cartels. It was considered the most violent city in the planet, statistically. Major Sergio Fajardo, who was a brilliant math teacher, he set a goal. He said, how can I reduce violence and increase opportunities for social mobility and reduce inequalities? That was the mathematical problem. He happened to be the son of planners and architects and landscape architects. So he had the two sides of the brain working, the strategy, the political, and also the care of spatial things. And he said, well, he took the example, and these are images of Medellin. Most of the barrios were up in the hills, secluded, no way to get there. And that's why the drug gangs and the drug lords operated in these secluded barrios. So how do we get into these barrios up on the hill without disrupting them, like Haussmann putting avenues through Paris? And he invented something very clever, aerial gondolas, ski lifts. There are no ski lifts in Colombia, in the tropics. But he said, if we take these ski lifts, we connect the formal city up to the barrio, minimum displacement, because you only have the pillars of the ski lift, and where we have a station, and we can see it in the image on the far left over there on your right, you create the station, and this station needs space to land. And as all stations, an area of mobility, around them you have accessibility and you produce change. So what did he do? He carved out public space. He placed the best schools. He said, let me map in the city where all the facilities are, the schools, the hospitals, the cultural facilities, and where not. And exactly there where there were not. Around these stations, he built the best libraries with the best access to internet, the best access to information, the best amphitheaters. He says the distressed neighborhoods need the best quality services. And that's what he did. He created these areas of centrality in those that never imagined they could have it. And then it's not only the physical aspects. He managed them. Concerts, art programs, or organizations to tap the internal forces to produce income. That was also addressed earlier in the conference today. And lo and behold, people from the middle class that had never ventured into this other culture, to the other side of the coin, started going up in these gondolas and enjoying the concerts in the poor neighborhoods and bringing together the two societies. That is a tremendous lesson. Just to finish, this is an interesting story. It's really, when I witnessed this, I knew the actor of this story. To get the kids off the streets, off the gangs, after the physical improvements have been made, and this program of cultural activities and rebirth of the barrios, they got facilitators, kids that were asked to go around with flyers, inviting the community to the events. Okay, so this youngster, he had all his flyers, and he went street by street, and he knocked on the door of this lady. She opened the door, received the flyer. The kid said, please come tomorrow. There's this incredible event. We're getting Carlos Baute, which is this great salsa guy in Colombia. I mean, it's fantastic, in the heart of the barrio. Please come. And she handed her the flyer. The woman received the flyer, closed the door, and then realized that this kid had killed her own son 3 months ago. Woo. So she immediately went to the city on the gondola and said, I want to speak with Sergio Fajardo, with the mayor. And said, listen, nothing is going to bring my kid back. But had this type of project had been placed before, many mothers would not have been in the situation that I am. God bless you. I'm going to the concert. We should all go to the concert. Thank you.
I think we need to have our mics. They're on. That's great. I'm going to ask the panelists each the same question, and you have 1 minute to give your answer. And that is, and we'll start with Diane, and we'll just work through the order of the chairs. If you had one recommendation, one action that you would recommend as a solution to these problems, what would you suggest? Diane?
Is it on? Yes, it is. I think there's a common thread here is, I think, organizing women that are leaders in that community and actually organizing them around an issue that they can actually act on is something that, and that's doable, is something I would strongly recommend, because what you'll find out is that the creativity that comes from the women in that neighborhood, the solutions are there. So it's a matter of just organizing them and then bringing in the resources and building those partnerships around an issue that they can address. Now, we addressed a couple issues in terms of food access and engaging their youth and generating income for their youth. But that came out of the women, out of organizing them, and now we're actually dealing with multiple issues with one solution. So that's what I would recommend.
And I want to talk about the area of restorative and criminal justice, because I think that art, although not a total solution, is certainly part of it. We have excellent statistics in our reentry program for women coming, especially women who are coming out of prison, providing women with meaningful opportunities, the power to learn that they are creative when they're incarcerated, tapping into that talent and that strength when they come out, and putting them to work doing, I think, the reason Mural Arts is successful at reentry is because the work has meaning and relevance, and people can acknowledge their gifts, and then using that as a platform to have them move on to another point in their life. I think it's absolutely critical. And those of you who are thinking about, what to do about the high population of people who are incarcerated, what we do with young women coming out of residential placement, we have seen that arts programs that are sustained over longer periods of time, that start in institutions and are carried out when they come out. If we can put people to work, especially women, we have seen an outpouring of talent, creativity, and success.
I want to emphasize the organizing of women, but in a way that really is allowing women to be the main power brokers. I think that very often, governments, I know planners will go out and say, yeah, we had a focus group with the people, and so we know what the people want.
Right.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ability to bring women together as key players in the communities, making sure, and I really loved what Claudia said, where it's the diversity of women, not just a token woman, and not just from one ethnic background, particularly in our cities, where we have so much diversity in our cities. We need to have this diversity represented in the coalitions that we pull together, and to not neglect the religious community, because they carry so much weight within these neighborhoods. And we need to educate the religious leaders about issues, and so they need to be part of these coalitions, hopefully to learn from the women who are speaking there. So yes, let's form these partnerships, these coalitions. Let's bring government into that so that government can be listening in a real way and learn from them.
That made it easy for me.
Really? Is that what you were going to say?
Yes, because because the message is that change can be achieved, and we have to learn from successful experiences. So we select the best politician, the best community leader, the developer, and the technicians. We get them to work together, and we show them what has been achieved in other places. We don't have to invent the wheel. And show how they did it. And let's go ahead with vigor and adapt it to each of our communities. That's it.
I'm going to ask a question. I have the prerogative. So I think one of the challenges is in cities is the different turf battles that every sector has, whether it's planning, transportation, whether it's food systems, whether it's schools. And all of you have addressed some way of integrating those, but that's very hard to do. And I wondered if one of you want to talk about effective strategies to try to really bring all of these stakeholders to work together.
Well, I think that it needs to come from the top. I mean, you know what? You need leadership at the top to open the door a crack, and you can go in and you can make change. But what you need is empowered, inspired, open-minded leaders who believe in an integrated model of government. I was really lucky. I had the good fortune to work with Estelle Richmond, and she was like a mentor to me. Estelle in the audience?
Yeah.
I don't see distance. Oh my God. How are you? Oh, my hero. How do you like? I can't believe I don't see. I should wear my glasses. So, and Estelle, she was like, Jane, you're going to be at the table, And so is DHS, public health. I mean, that was the whole model of social services, that we would all be around the table and we could talk about working together. I think that's critical.
And I want Diane to talk about this too.
Yeah. Oops. Okay, still working. I think when you actually have a solution that really is addressing a need that's defined by the women and the leaders in that community, and they come up with a creative solution, and then you pull the partners and say, this is the role that each one plays, and how you can actually make this a reality, and then have a small success. I think that's really a way to engage partners. I mean, with this urban farming program, we brought in Philadelphia Green, we brought in the Department of Rec. Department of Recreation and Parks right now is allowing us to have any land we want on any recreation center. That's phenomenal, that they're saying you can take it over, you can change this into urban farms, that we trust you now. And then that's a huge partnership, because now we have access to land that we can transform. But that came because they saw a committed group of leaders and youth, and they had a small success in one neighborhood. We are now partnering with ShopRite Grocery Store. ShopRite Grocery Store is now saying, we want you to grow for us. So we now have a potential source of tremendous revenue for the youth that are involved in this program. So I think to really integrate it into this is if you have the leadership at the neighborhood level and they're coming up with solutions that are addressing really key issues that our mayor and our city government's facing, like food access, how do you engage youth, how do you clean up these neighborhoods, they need partners. They really need partners, the government, and they want creative solutions. And so that's, I think that's how you build some of this, how you integrate it into a larger scale.
Grace, do you have?
Well, just to emphasize the leadership, I think that is important, but the leaders need to be informed from the grassroots. And that's the key, and the leader needs to be transformed by the grassroots. Let me give a quick example. In Jaco, it's a beach city in Costa Rica. You may have seen it on House Hunters International. You know, they always want to buy in Jaco, which I always think is ridiculous that place it's been really overdeveloped. And the result has been, you know, a lot of waste waters going into the ocean and polluting the ocean. So a very real problem for the community itself. And so they came up with an innovative and creative way of dealing with this problem. They formed a coalition with the Department of Health, the Department of Tourism, the mayor's office, the police, and they formed this group every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. This group gets together and says, okay, which of the buildings are not meeting the standards of waste management that we have required? And they go together and they inspect that building. And so if there's an issue from any of these departments, immediately it gets addressed because there's a representative there. So it is, but they learned this, the mayor learned this because of the people saying, we can't stand this happening anymore in our community. And because their voices inspired the mayor to say, how do we deal with it? Together, they were able to do it. So I think it's important to have the visionary leaders, but they have to be very well informed by the grassroots.
Great.
Good. The only thing I would like to add to that is that usually the bureaucratic aspects of public policy are so heavy, especially in the United States, to go through the red tape, the legal restrictions, that you need visionary leaders that can bend the rules or work outside of the rules and demonstrate that changes are possible. And this liaison with the community leadership and with communicators that can facilitate with energy processes of change is so important because it's very difficult to dismantle bureaucracy.
Yeah, great. I'm going to read one of the questions from the audience. And this one says that there are real problems with structural inequality with men and women, and that we do not promote the ability of poor men or young men to provide for their families. So how do you support young men to promote their family well-being and support emotionally and financially for the women in their lives? So it's focusing on young men.
Okay. Well, we have, enormous, we have 8 programs, and several of them really do focus on, while we focus on young women, we also have direct focus on young men. So, and I think that because our programs are about creating community public art, there is a sense of caring and empathy that's critical to develop in them in order to work with us, because they have to think about the well-being of the community. And so we work with them individually, and that translates to family, and that translates to community. So it's a way of connecting them to the world. They are disconnected, alienated, isolated, and it's no wonder that there is no way for them to reach out and connect with a young woman, or if they're a father, they're 14 years old and they have a child. They are absolutely, it's like they've landed from Mars. And so very strategically and carefully, we try to cultivate in them a sense of humanity. And that is what's really important. And I think any good program that's worth anything is going to do that. Right. And it has to be done over a longer period of time, not a 4-week program. It will take several years, but they can change.
Diane, do you want
to? Yeah, through our program, we actually have more young men than women in our urban farming program, and we have about 65% adolescent males. And on the average, they stay with us for 3 years. So it's not just a summer internship. And it really is a leadership program, and it's building. It's doing several things. It's building a network of young men and women, which is great that they're working together. I have to say we need to have them work together instead of separating them, because I think these violence issues needs to be addressed with both men and women. So we're actually doing a lot with creating co-gender leadership teams with the young men and women through this program. And I think they're starting to understand how do they support each other, how do they work together as young men and women. And then they're actually really creating leadership skills. For example, we had a group of young men and women go to a conference in Washington and do a presentation. We had the White House staff come and actually visit one of our urban farms, and the young men and women actually gave presentations. The USDA is now partnering with us and now providing internships for youth in this program to do that are interested in agriculture. So I think if you provide opportunities, particularly because we're talking about women, but women's health is definitely related to men. Because men, like Jane was just saying, particularly men of color, are feeling so ostracized, undervalued. They don't even feel like they don't feel like they're caregivers of their families. And so what we're doing is, through this program, we're also allowing young men to mentor younger students. So we have students coming from K through 8th grade coming into the farms, and they actually are teaching these young kids. So men are starting to get that sense of caregiving. You know, it's like women are not just caregivers, men are and they need to be caregivers. So I think we're pulling them into that role in a kind of indirect way. And we don't use anti-violence. This is not an anti-violence program. Right? We don't even talk about that. This is about leadership. This is about you are an asset to your community, you're an asset to your family, you're an asset to the kids in the school, you're an asset. It's a strength-based approach. That's how we focus. That's how we work with these young men and women.
Excellent.
Fabulous.
Do either of you want to comment?
I cannot add on to that. That's fabulous. Yeah.
Here's a question. How do you ensure sustained enthusiasm in the mobilized community after an intensive intervention? How do you keep it up?
Well, I would say we build really strong partners wherever we go, and that you have to, I think that many of the changes that happen occur, when we're there, but I would say the larger percentage of changes happen when we're gone, and you structure your engagement so that's what occurs. Right. So consequently, because we're in part with city government, we bring in city services, we do the work, and we set it up so that there's a 6-month plan of action. What's going to happen after we're gone? So in a sense, you're creating a strategic plan everywhere you work. Now, that's a lot of work. We do 100 major projects a year. But I think it's necessary because we don't want to just be art that's parachuted down from the sky and that it be a random experience. It has to be part of something larger. So it calls in the beginning to be more planful, to look at what else is going on around the city, to work with CDCs and community organizations about a larger plan. We now create master plans. We work with urban planners and architects and landscape architects to try to look at the broader picture of this community and their health 6 months out, a year out, 3 years out. So if you come to a Mural Arts event, you're going to see people who worked with us in 1998. In Grays Ferry, Strawberry Mansion, Norris Square, Southwest Philly, people have remained connected to us, but more importantly, this work is about capacity building and sustainability. And if it's not, then we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I'd like to just bounce right off of that, capacity building is key. I know that in the groups that I work with in Kenya, and it's been true in Los Angeles as well, but one of the things that I myself do is really work on teaching women skills for assessment, participatory evaluation of the program, their own way of looking at what's happening in their own community so that they themselves gain the tools to keep evaluating what's happening and then keep strategizing for how to then change. And this is incredibly empowering because they themselves are the ones who are producing the strategies for change. It isn't an outsider coming in as doing an intervention, but rather from the very beginning, they're gaining these tools. I like to think of myself as a researcher coming in and doing research, but doing it in a participatory way so that when I leave, they're continuing the research so that, this can continue to strengthen the arms of the community itself, so to speak, and give strength to the legs and the knees of that community. And I think that leads for sustainability as they begin thinking. And sustainability has to be built into anything that we do. We have to be thinking about levels of sustainability because otherwise it won't continue. But I do think participatory approaches are the way that people themselves are empowered to keep working within the community.
Great. This is a question for David. The isolation and the problems in barrios and favelas and slums, the Medellin seems like a wonderful way of introducing connectivity, but how could anybody else do that? I mean, has anybody else done that? Has that happened in Caracas? Has it happened in Rio? Has it happened anywhere else?
Well, it's role models. I mean, we believe so strongly in community participation, but you can imagine that no one in these barrios in Medellin had seen a gondola.
Right.
When this thing was under construction, they said, well, what is this?
What is this?
But after they saw that it worked, then the community say, let's go for it.
Right.
So sometimes the initial moves are so difficult, but then after you get the energy and you demonstrate that things bring positive change, then people are willing to participate and to add. So that has to do a bit with the sustainability. So I'll try to answer the two things. The first thing is, like in the case of Medellin, after they proved that it could be done, then there were programs that had to do with maintenance, community participation, program of activities, all these cultural events. The following interventions, it was not the architects designing the skateboards. It is sitting down and asking questions. Well, what do you want in your park? How would you name your park? Where would you locate it? Because already there was a synergy between a clever idea and really the needs of the community. And going back to the Medellin case study, it's being emulated. The first metro cable just started an operation in Caracas.
It did?
Yes.
Oh.
My town, they did not learn all the lessons from Medellin because they invested mainly in the transportation device. It ended up costing 10 times more than Medellin, but they missed a bit the point of the multiple activities. It's the nodes, it's a public space, it's the library, it's the connectivity. I mean, I would add a clever device and sometimes so simple. Imagine this hill divided by ravines. Usually the people that populated these ravines came from different areas of the country and in different times. So these groups that bonded from their origin sometimes were controlled by different drug lords. Therefore, the ravines were the barriers. They had the fights, and that's where they would launch the bodies. So what did these clever people do in Medellin? If you had a gondola station there and you had ravines separating barrios at the same elevation, they built bridges over the ravines, beautiful bridges, and they anchored the bridges with plazas and the small schools and the climbing walls. And they named them El Puente de la Paz, the bridge of...
Wow.
So I mean, this is heavy
powerful
stuff.
That's very powerful.
Okay,
yeah.
so the ravines became the place of encounter, and not of death. So that's creative thinking.
Yeah, it is, totally.
Oh, we have a lot to learn, don't we?
Here's a question for Diane, possibly, but everybody might want to comment. What would it take to bring communities healthy food rather than the unhealthy fast food products that are creating the obesity epidemic in children?
Well, I think one of the things we're doing is actually creating a community local food system in New York. I don't know where that came from. In Philadelphia. Through, like we said, we have thousands of vacant lots, and now we're saying let's have, in every neighborhood, let's have an urban farm that actually produces locally grown food for that community. So we're actually trying to create a model that can be replicated across the entire city. Right now, like I said, we're up to almost 10 urban farms that's serving about 25 different neighborhoods in Philadelphia. So I think part of that is actually using space in a really smart way that actually can improve access to locally grown produce, and having that money go right back to the community. So again, the youth are getting paid to do this. We actually now have a new partnership with Penn State where they're going to actually start building hoop houses, greenhouses on these farms. So we're actually going to start extending our growing season to 10 months out of the year, which is really exciting. So again, it's building those partnerships and saying, okay, we can grow this much. How can we grow longer seasons? That's when we talked to Penn State. Now let's have hoop houses come in. And now we can extend our growing season for 10 months a year. So I think that's part of the model of improving access. And also I think you still got to work with trying to get some grocery stores into the neighborhoods. And I know Food Trust is doing a lot of work around that. And ShopRite, like Jeff Brown, who owns ShopRite stores, 5 of them in Philadelphia, most of them are located in poor neighborhoods. So that's why we're partnering with them, because they are committed to actually getting these major grocery stores into neighborhoods. We're also have an idea with youth where there's not, how do we get people from their home even into these local farms and also into these grocery stores? Well, we have this idea of actually having bike lanes where youth will actually deliver some of this food, particularly those seniors who can't really be mobile. Yeah. So we're actually we're working with Neighborhood Bike Works, which is an awesome organization in Philadelphia, to create bike lanes, because they're not outside Center City, and most people who ride bikes are in the poor neighborhoods in this city, and they don't have bike lanes. So how do we create safe pathways from people's homes, particularly senior centers and seniors who can't get there? And then how do we engage youth in more physical activity? We'll create bike lanes and then have them deliver the food to seniors. So this is another project. So I think it takes a lot of creative approaches to this, but it's
from
all
completely different aspects.
Yeah, but it's the people in the neighborhoods that are actually, they're the ones actually leading this, Yeah. And then you bring in the partners to help facilitate that and bring in more resources. So wonderful. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes.
Just give an example from Nairobi. A group of NGOs, they're community-based actually, community-based organizations that are working with street children. One of the big problems, of course, is food scarcity right now, particularly with climate change. It's becoming even more of an issue. They've come together and say, okay, if this is a problem, we're not having enough food for feeding the children that we're taking care of, much less others who are out on the street. They've come together and in a pilot project that is just in its first stages have secured a lot just a little bit outside of Nairobi, on the outskirts of Nairobi, put it that way, which fortunately you still have some urban space in Nairobi. It's only a city of 3 million. And they are using that as an agricultural plot where the children themselves are learning the skills for farming it and creating the food that they themselves and then it's being distributed to the different organizations that are working together so that it's providing food for those organizations who have come together. So that's another model of a way in which you can provide food.
I think we have time for one question. Yeah, okay, Diane.
Just a couple other things. We're also working with the Food Trust, and corner stores are a big source where people buy food, and the produce is really poor quality and very expensive. So we're actually working with the Food Trust to get the vegetables, fruit, and herbs that the youth are growing into the corner stores in the neighborhood. So that's another initiative that we're doing, which will help increase access. So we're trying to create multiple access points in neighborhoods where people can walk to, whether it's at the actual urban farms, it's in the corner stores, it's now going to be in ShopRite stores, locally grown food, that is actually tailored. So if you want, like, if sweet potatoes is really something, or cilantro, because it's more of a Mexican neighborhood, we're actually growing it based on what that neighborhood wants. So it's a multi-pronged approach, and again, it's driven by the youth and the mothers and the people in the community.
Do we have time for one more question? Okay. This is by Eileen Sullivan-Marks, who asks the panel, how can we best, we've been talking a lot about youth and about young people, and she asks the question, how can we best use the wisdom of older women in cities to promote health and quality?
Well, many of the women that I work with are older. They're not the youth that I work with, and they're just incredibly brilliant women. They understand the context, and they have this great heart for participating. So it's a question of providing opportunities, opening the door for ways for recognizing what they are already doing. This is very much a problem. Women go around in their daily lives doing things that are unbelievable, but nobody is acknowledging it, that it is an incredible strategy. And so the ability to recognize this and to promote it gives a sense of, oh, I didn't realize that this was so important. But that is what we need. I think grandmothers in our own cities, you know, we need to acknowledge the incredible role that they're playing with our kids, and that empowers them to in fact share what they've been learning with others. So it's really a recognition of what people are doing, and then coming alongside and building up more skills and support networks to keep that happening.
And I think that programs have to find space for that. I mean, it would be very easy just to be youth focused, and that's true. And 5 times a year, what we do is create 5 major projects that are intergenerational, because it's obvious from the time we were the anti-graffiti network that the wisdom of the elders is really profound, and how do you capture that and pass it on to young people. And so many times when we don't do a project that's not the result of a lengthy community process. And you often hear people, or you read it in the Mural applications, we want murals where the seniors will connect with young people, where the wisdom of the seniors will pass on to young people, will there be a connection. So you have to create space and time for that to happen.
Excellent. Just what Jane just said, we're doing some intergenerational programs around food, because food is such a cultural issue, and youth don't even know their history. So we actually are working with some of our neighborhood centers where they're doing intergenerational program around cooking, and the elders are coming in and teaching them, you know, whether it's an African community, whether it's, you know, East Asian community, they're saying, do you really know the history of your people? And they're doing it around food. And then we're also working with the Village of Arts and Humanities to develop a community kitchen, and the community kitchen is actually going to be run by the elder women. And it's going to be a source of health and nutrition. It's going to be a source of cooking and education about their culture and about their history. So we are doing a lot more with intergenerational programs, which has a tremendous benefit on both the elders and the youth.
And there's weaving, and there's knitting, and there's all kinds of art making that people can do together too. So it's about engagement and connection.
Great. I want to thank this incredible panel. You have been amazing. I mean, great ideas, great actions, great solutions. Thank you very, very much.